The Fairy of the Dawn. Once upon a time, what should happen did happen, and if it had not happened, this tale would never have been told. There was once an emperor, very great and mighty, and he ruled over an empire so large that no one knew where it began or where it ended. But if nobody could tell the exact extent of his sovereignty, everybody was aware that the emperor's right eye laughed, while his left eye wept. One or two men of valor had the courage to go and ask him the reason for this strange fact, but he only laughed and said nothing, and the reason of this deadly enmity between his two eyes was a secret known only to the monarch himself. Honestly, it sounds like he must have had a stroke. All the while, the emperor's sons were growing up, and such sons! They were like the morning stars in the sky. Floria, the eldest, was so tall and broad-shouldered that no man in the kingdom could approach him. Costin, the second, was quite different. Smaller stature and slightly built. He had a strong arm and a stronger wrist. No comment. Petru, the third and youngest, was tall and thin, more like a girl than a boy. He spoke very little, but laughed and sang and laughed from morning till night. He was very seldom serious, but then he had a way with thinking and stroking his hair over his forehead, which made him look old enough to sit in his father's council. "You are grown up, Flora," said Petru one day to his oldest brother. "Do go and ask father why one eye laughs and the other weeps." But Florio would not go. He had learnt by experience that this question always puts the emperor in a rage. Petru went next to Costin, but did not succeed any better with him. Well, if everyone is afraid, I suppose I must do it myself," observed Petru at length. No sooner said than done. The boy went straight to his father and put on his question. "May you go blind!" exclaimed the emperor in wrath. "What business is it of yours?" and boxed Petru's ears. Petru returned to his brothers and told them that he had befallen him, but not long after it struck him that his father's left eye seemed to weep less, and his right eye to laugh more. "I wonder if it has anything to do with my question," he thought. "I'll try again. After all, what do boxes on the ear matter?" So he put his question for a second time, and had the same answer. But the left eye only wept now and then, while the right eye looked 10 years younger. "It must really be true," thought Petru. "Now I know what I have to do. I shall go on putting the question, getting boxes on the ears, till both eyes laugh together." No sooner said than done. Petru never forswore himself. "Petru, my dear boy," cried the emperor, both his eyes laughing together, "I see you've got this on the brain. Well, I will let you into my secret. The right eye laughs when I look at my 3 sons and see how strong and handsome you all are, and the other eye weeps because I fear that after I die, you will not be able to just a little. But if you can bring me the water from the spring of the Fairy of the Dawn to bathe my eyes, then they will laugh forevermore, for I shall know that my sons are brave enough to overcome any foe." Thus spoke the emperor, and Petru picked up his hat and went to find his brothers. The 3 young men took counsel together, and talked the subject well over, as brothers should do. At the end of it was Flora, as the eldest, who went to the stables, chose the best and handsomest horse they contained, saddled him, and then took leave of the court. "I'm starting this at once," he said to his brothers, "and after a year, a month, and a day and a week, if I have not returned with the water from the spring of the Fairy of the Dawn, then you, Costin, had better come after me." And so saying, he disappeared around the corner of the palace. 3 days and 3 nights he never drew rein. Like a spirit of a horse flew over the mountains and valleys till he came to the borders of the empire. Here was a deep, deep trench, girdled in a whole way around, and there was only a single bridge by which the trench could be crossed. Floria made instantly for the bridge, and there pulled up to look around him once more, to take leave of his native land. Then he turned, but before him was standing a dragon. Oh, such a dragon! A dragon with 3 heads and 3 horrible faces, all with their mouths wide open, one jaw reaching to heaven and the other to earth. At this awful sight, Floria did not wait to give battle. He put spurs to his horse and dashed off. Where he neither knew nor cared. The dragon heaved a sigh and vanished without leaving a trace behind him. Poor dragon. A week went by, and Floria did not return home. 2 passed, and nothing was heard of him. After a month, Costin began to haunt the stables to look out for the horse for himself. At the moment a year, a month, a week, and a day were over, Costin mounted his horse and took leave of his youngest brother. "If I fail, then you come," he said, and followed the path that Floria had taken. The dragon at the bridge was more fearful, and his 3 heads more terrible than before, and the young hero rode away still faster than his brother had done. Nothing more was heard either of him or Floria, and Pietro remained alone. "I must go after my brothers," said Pietro one day to his father. "Go then," said his father, "and may you have better luck than they." And he bade farewell to Pietro, who rode straight towards the borders of the kingdom. The dragon on the bridge was yet more dreadful than the one Floria and Costin had seen, for this one had 7 heads instead of only 3. Pietro stopped for a moment when he caught sight of this terrible creature, and then he found his voice. "Get out of my way!" he cried. "Get out of my way!" He repeated again, as the dragon did not move. "Get out of the way!" And with the last summons he drew a sword and rushed upon him. In an instant the heavens seemed to darken around him, and he was surrounded with fire. Fire to the right of him, fire to the left of him, fire to the front of him, and fire to the rear. Nothing but fire, whichever way he looked, for the dragon's 7 heads were vomiting flame. The horse neighed and reared at the horrible sight, but Pietro could not use the sword he had in his readiness. "Oh, be quiet, this won't do," he said, dismounting hastily, but holding the bridle firm in his left hand and grasping his sword in his right. But even so he got on no better, for he could see nothing but fire and smoke. "Well, this is no help for it. I must go back and get a better horse," said he, and mounted again and rode homewards. At the gate of the palace his nurse, Olenbersha, was waiting for him eagerly. "Oh, Pietro, my son, I knew you would have to come back," she cried. "You did not set about the matter properly." "Oh, how ought I have set about it?" asked Pietro, half angrily, half sadly. "Look here, my boy," replied Olenberska. "You can never reach the spring of the Fairy of Dawn unless you ride a horse in which your father, the Emperor, rode in his youth. Go and ask where it is to be found, and then mount it and be off with you." Pietro thanked her heartily for the advice, and at once went to make enquiries about the horse. "By the light of my eyes," exclaimed the Emperor when Pietro had posed the question, "who has told you anything about that? That must have been that old witch of a Bersha. Have you lost your wits? 50 years have passed since I was young, and who knows where the bones of my horse may be rotting, or whether a scrap of his reins still lie in his stall. I have forgotten all about him long ago." Pietro turned away in anger, then went back to his old nurse. "Do not be cast down," she said with a smile. "If that is how the affair stands, all will go well. Go and fetch a scrap of the reins, and I shall soon know what must be done." The place was full of saddles, bridles, and bits of leather. Petru picked out the oldest and blackest and most decayed pair of reins and brought them to the old woman, who murmured something over them and sprinkled them with incense and held them out to the young man. "Take the reins," she said, "and strike them violently against the pillars of the house." Petru did what he was told, and scarcely had the reins touched the pillars when something happened. How, I have no idea. He made Petru stare with surprise. A horse stood before him, a horse whose equal in beauty the world had never seen, and a saddle on him of gold and precious stones, and with such a dazzling bridle you hardly dared to look at it, lest you should lose your sight. A splendid horse, a splendid saddle, and a splendid bridle, all ready for the splendid young prince. "Jump on the back of the brown horse," said the old woman, and she turned around and went back into her house. The moment Petru was seated on the horse, he felt his arms 3 times as strong as before. "Sit down on the saddle, my lord, for we have a long way to go and no time to waste," said the brown horse, and Petru soon saw that they were riding as no man and horse had ever ridden before. On the bridge stood a dragon, but not the same one he had tried to fight with, for this dragon had 12 heads, and each one more hideous and shooting forth more terrible flames than the other. But, horrible though he was, he had met his match. Petru showed no fear, but rolled up his sleeves so that his arms might be free. "Get out of my way," he said when he had done, but the dragon's heads only breathed forth more flames and smoke. Petru wasted no more words, but drew his sword and prepared to throw himself on the bridge. "Stop a moment, be careful, my lord," put in the horse, "and be sure to do as I tell you. Dig your spurs into my body up to the tail. Draw your sword and keep yourself ready, for we shall have to leap over both bridge and dragon. When you see that we are right above the dragon, cut off the biggest head, and wipe the blood off the sword and put it back clean in the sheath before we touch earth again." So Petru dug in his spears, drew his sword, and cut the head and wiped the blood, and put the sword back in the sheath, for the horse's hooves had even touched the ground again. And in this fashion they passed the bridge. "But we've got to go further still," said Petru, after he had taken a farewell glance through his native land. "Yes, forwards," answered the horse. "But you must tell me, my lord, at which speed you wish to go. Like the wind, like thought, like desire, or like a curse?" Petru looked about him, up at the heavens and down again to the earth. A desert lay spread out before him, whose aspect made his hair stand on end. "We will ride at different speeds," he said. "Not so fast as to grow tired, and not so slow as to waste our time." And as they rode, one day like the wind, the next like thought, the third and fourth like desire and like a curse, till they reached the borders of the desert. "Now, walk so that I may look around and see what I have never seen before," said Petru, rubbing his eyes like one who wakes from a sleep, or like him who beholds something so strange as if it seems that before Petru lay a wood made of copper, with copper trees and copper leaves, and bushes and flowers also of copper. Petru stood and stared as a man does when he sees something that he has never seen before, and of which he has never even heard. Then he rode right into the wood. Each side of the way rows of flowers began to praise Petru, and tried to persuade him to pick some of them and make himself a wreath. "Take me, for I am lovely and can give you strength to whoever plucks me," said one. "Now take me, for whoever wears me in his hat will be loved by the most beautiful woman in the world," pleaded a second. Then one after another bestirred himself, and each more charmed than the last, all promising in soft, sweet voices wonderful things to Petru, if he would only pick them. Petru was not deaf to their persuasion, and was just stooping to pick one when the horse sprang to one side. "Why don't you stay still?" asked Pichu roughly. "Do not pick the flowers. It will bring you bad luck," answered the horse. "Why should it do that?" "These flowers are under a curse. Whoever plucks them must fight the Welwa in the woods." "What kind of goblin is the Welwa?" "Oh, do leave in peace. But listen, look at the flowers as much as you like, but pick none." And the horse walked on slowly. Pichu knew by experience that he would do well to attend the horse's advice, so he made a great effort and tore his mind away from the flowers. But in vain. If a man is fated to be unlucky, unlucky he will be, whatever he may do. The flowers went on beseeching him till his heart grew ever weaker and weaker. "What must come will come," said Pichu at length. "At any rate, I shall see the Well of the Woods, what she is like, and which way I had best fight her. If she is ordained to be the cause of my death, then, well, it be so. But if I shall conquer her through your 1,200 Welwas." And once more he stopped and stooped down to gather the flowers. "You have done very wrong," said the horse sadly. "But it can't be helped now. Get yourself ready to battle, or here's the Welwa." Hardly had done speaking, and scarcely had Pichu twisted his wreath, when a soft breeze rose on all sides. And after the breeze came a windstorm, and after the windstorm swelled and swelled until everything around was blotted out in darkness, and darkness overcome them with a thick cloak, while the earth swayed and shook under their feet. "Are you afraid?" asked the horse, shaking his mane. "Not yet," replied Pichu stoutly, though the cold shivers were running down his back. "What must come will come, whatever it is." The words were hardly spoken. "Don't be afraid," said the horse. "I will help you. Take the bridle from my neck and try to catch the Welwa with it." The words were hardly spoken, and Pichu had no time even to unbuckle the bridle, when the Welwa herself stood before him, and Pichu could not bear to look at her, so horrible she was. She had not exactly a head, yet neither was she without one. She did not fly through the air, but neither did she walk upon the earth. She had a mane like a horse, horns like a deer, face like a bear, eyes like a polecat, while her body had something of each, and that was a Welwa. Pichu planted himself firmly in his stirrups and began to lay about him with a sword, but could feel nothing. A night and a day went by, and the fight was still undecided, but at last the Welwa began to pant for breath. "Let us wait a little and rest," gasped she. Pichu stopped and lowered his sword. "You must not stop an instant," said the horse, and Pichu gathered all his strength and laid about him harder than ever. The Welwa gave a neigh like a horse and a howl like a wolf, and threw herself afresh on Pichu. For another day and night the battle raged more furiously than before, and Pichu grew exhausted, as he could scarcely move his arm. "Let us wait a little and rest," cried the Welwa for a second time, "for I see you are as weary as I am." "You must not stop for an instant," said the horse. And Pichu kept on fighting, though he barely had the strength to move his arm. But the Welwa had ceased to throw herself upon him, and began to deliver her blows cautiously, as if she had no longer the power to strike. On the third day, they were still fighting, but as the morning sky began to redden, Pichu somehow managed, how I cannot tell, to throw the bridle over the head of the tired Welwa. In a moment, the Welwa sprang as a horse, and the most beautiful horse in the world. "Sweet be your life, for you have delivered me from my enchantment," said he, and began to rub his nose against his brother's. And he told Pichu all his story, and how he had been bewitched for many years. Petru tied the Welwa to his own horse and rode on. Where did he ride? I can't really tell you, but he rode on past till he got out of the copper wood. "Stay still and let me look about, and see what I never seen before," said Petru again to his horse. For in front of him stretched a forest that was far more wonderful, as it was made of glistening trees and shining flowers. It was the Silverwood. As before, the flowers began to beg the young man to gather them. "Oh, do not pluck them," said one Woa, trotting beside him, "for my brother is 7 times stronger than I." But though Petru had the experience of what this meant, it was no use, and after a moment of hesitation, he began to gather the flowers and twist himself a wreath. Then the storm wind howled louder, and the earth trembled more violently, and night grew darker than the first time. The Welwa of the Silver Wood came rushing on with 7 times the speed of the other. For 3 days and 3 nights they fought, but at last Petru caught the bridle over the head of the second Welwa. "Sweet be your life, you have delivered me from my enchantment," said the second Welwa, and they all journeyed on together. But as soon as they came to the Goldwood, far more lovely than the other two, and again Petru's companions pleaded with him to ride through it quickly and leave the flowers alone. But Petru turned a deaf ear to all they said, and before he had woven his golden crown, he felt something terrible that he could not see was coming near him right out of the earth. He drew his sword and made himself ready to fight. "I will die," he said, "or we shall have a bridle over his head." He had hardly said the words when a thick fog wrapped itself around him, and it was so thick that he could not see his own hand, or hear the sound of his own voice. For a day and a night he fought with the sword, without ever once seeing his enemy, and suddenly the fog began to lighten. By the dawn of the second day it had vanished altogether, and the sun shone brightly as in the heavens. It seemed to Petru that he had been born again. And the Woa, she had vanished. "You had better take a breath while you can, for the fight will have to begin all over again," said the horse. "What was it?" "It was the Welwa," replied the horse, charging into the fog. "Listen, she is coming." And Petru had hardly drawn a long breath when he felt something approaching from the side, though he could not tell. A river, yet not a river, for it seemed to not flow over the earth, but to go where it liked and leave no trace of its passage. "Woe to be me!" cried Petru, frightened at last. "Beware, never stand still," called the brown horse, and more he could not say, for the water was choking him. The battle began anew. For night and a day Petru fought on without knowing at whom or what he struck. At dawn on the second, he felt that his feet were lame. "Oh, now I am done for," he thought, as his blows fell thicker and harder with his desperation. And the sun came out, and the water disappeared, without his knowing how or when. "Take a breath," said the horse, "for you have no time to lose. The Welwa will return in a moment." Petru made no reply, only wondered how, exhausted as he was, he should ever be able to carry on the fight. But he settled himself in his saddle and grasped his sword and waited. And then something came to him. What, I can't tell you. Perhaps in his dreams a man may see a creature which is what he has not got, and what not got was it has. At last, it was what the Welma seemed like to Petru. She flew with her feet and walked with her wings. Her head was on her back, and her tail was on top of her body. Her eyes were like her neck, and her neck was her forehead. How to describe her further, I can't really say. Petru felt for a moment as if his heart was wrapped in a garment of fear, and then he shook himself and took heart, and fought as he had never fought before. As the day wore on, his strength began to fail, and when darkness fell, he could hardly keep his eyes open. By midnight, he knew he was no longer on his horse, but standing on the ground, though he could not have been able to tell how he got there. When the gray light of morning came, he was past standing on his feet, and now fought upon his knees. "Make one more struggle. It is nearly over now," said the horse, seeing Petru's strength was waning fast. Petru swiped the sweat from his brow with his gauntlet. With a desperate effort, he rose to his feet. "Strike the Welma on the mouth with the bridle," said the horse, and Petru did it. The Welma uttered a neigh so loud that Petru thought he would be deaf for life, and then, though she was too nearly spent, flung herself upon her enemy. But Petru was on the watch and threw the bridle over her head, then rushed on, so that when the day broke, there were 3 horses trotting alongside him. "May your wife be the most beautiful of women," said the Welma, "for you have delivered me from my enchantment." So the 4 horses galloped fast, and by nightfall they were at the borders of the Golden Forest. Then Petru began to think of the crowns that he wore, and what they had cost him. "After all, what do I want with so many? I will keep the best," he said to himself, taking off first the copper crown and then the silver, and then threw them away. "Stay!" cried the horse. "Don't throw them away. Perhaps we shall find use for them. Get down and pick them up." So Petru got down and picked them up, and they all went on. In the evening, when the sun Petru saw a wide heath stretching before him. At the same instant, the horse stood still of itself. "What is the matter?" asked Petru. "I am afraid that something evil will happen to us," answered the horse. "But why should it?" "We are going to enter the kingdom of the goddess Mythwatch, and the further we ride into the colder it shall get. But all along the road there are huge fires, and lest you stop and warm yourself at them." "And why should I not warm myself?" "Something fearful will happen to you if you do," replied the horse sadly. "Well, forward," cried Petru lightly. "If we have got to bear the cold, I must bear it." With every step they went to the kingdom of Midwatch. The air grew colder and more icy, till even the marrow in their bones was frozen. Petru was no coward, and he had gone through what had straitened his powers and endurance, and he stood the test bravely. Along each road on each side were great fires, with men standing in them, who spoke pleasantly to Petru as they went by, and invited him to join them. The breath froze in his mouth, but he took no notice, only bade his horse to ride on faster. How long Petru was waging a battle silently in the cold, one cannot tell, for everybody knows that the kingdom of Midwatch is not to be crossed in a day. But he struggled on, though the frozen rocks burst around, and though his teeth chattered, and even at And jumping from the horse, Petru threw the reins over the horse's neck and entered the hut. "Good day, little mother," said he. "Very well, thank you, my frozen friend." Petru laughed and waited for her to speak. "You have borne yourself bravely," went the goddess, tapping him on the shoulder. "Now you shall have your reward." And she opened an iron chest, out of which she took a little box. "Look," she said, "this little box has been lying here for ages, waiting for the man who could win his way through the Ice Kingdom. Take it and treasure it, for some day it may help you. If you open it, it will tell you anything you want, and give you news of your fatherland." Petru thanked her gratefully for the gift, and mounted his horse and rode away. He opened the casket. "What are your commands?" asked a voice inside. Give me news of my father, he replied, rather nervously. He is sitting in council with his nobles, answered the casket. Is he well? Well, not particularly, for he is furiously angry. What has angered him? Your brothers Costin and Floria, replied the casket. It seems to me that they are trying to rule him and the kingdom as well, and the old man says they are not fit to do it. Push on, good horse, for we have no time to lose, cried Petru, and he shut the box and put it back in his pocket. They rushed on as fast as ghosts, as whirlwinds, as vampires that hunt in midnight, and how long they rode no one can tell, for the way is far. Stop! I have some advice to give you, said the horse at last. Well, what is it? Asked Petru. You have known what it is to suffer cold. You will have to endure heat, and such you have never dreamed of. Be brave as you now were then. Let no one tempt you to try to cool yourself, or evil will befall you. Forwards, answered Petru, and do not worry yourself. If I have escaped without being frozen, there is no chance of my melting. Why not? This is a heat that will melt the marrow in your bones, a heat that is only to be felt in the kingdom of the goddess of thunder. And it was hot. The very iron in the horse's shoes began to melt. But Petru gave no heed. The sweat ran down from his face, and he dried it with his gauntlet. What heat could be he never knew before, and on the way, not a stone's throw from the road, lay the most delicious valleys, full of shady trees and bubbling streams. When Petru looked at them, his heart burned from within him, and his mouth grew parched. And standing among the flowers were lovely maidens who called him in soft voices till he had to shut his eyes against their spells. Come, my hero, come and rest. The heat will kill you, they said. Petru shook his head and said nothing, for he had lost the power of speech. Long he rode in this awful state. How long, none can tell. Suddenly the heat seemed to become less, and in the distance he saw little huts on a hill. This was the dwelling of the goddess of thunder. And when he drew rein at her door, the goddess herself came out to meet him. She welcomed him, kindly invited him in, and bade him tell her all of his adventures. So Petru told her all that had happened to him, and why he was there, and then took a farewell of her, as he had no time to lose. For, he said, who knows how far the Fairy of the Dawn may be? Stay a moment, for I have a word of advice to give you. You are about to enter the kingdom of Venus. Go and tell her, as a message from me, that I hope she will not tempt you to delay. And on your way back, come to me again, and I will give you something that may be of use to you. So, Petru mounted his horse, and had hardly ridden 3 steps, when he found himself in a new country. Here he was neither hot nor cold, but the air was warm and soft like spring, though the way ran through the heath covered with sand and thistles. What can that be? Asked Petru, when he saw a long way off, at the very end of the heath, something resembling a house. That is the house of the goddess Venus, replied the horse, and if we ride hard, we may reach it before dark. And he darted off like an arrow, so that as twilight fell, they found themselves nearing the house. Petru's heart leapt at the sight, for all the way along he had been followed by a crowd of shadowy figures who danced about him from right to left, from front to back, and Petru, though a brave man, now and then felt a thrill of fear. They won't hurt you, said the horse. They are the daughters of the whirlwind, amusing themselves while they are watching for the ogre and the moon. Then he stopped in front of the house, and Petru jumped off and went to the door. "Oh, don't be in such a hurry," cried the horse. "There are several things I must tell you first. You cannot enter the house of the goddess Venus like that. She is always watched and guarded by the whirlwind." "What am I to do then?" "Take the copper wreath and go with it to the little hill over there. When you reach it, say to yourself, 'Were there ever such lovely maidens, such angels, such fairy souls?' And then hold the wreath high in the air and cry, 'Oh, if I knew whether any one of them would accept this wreath from me! If I knew, and throw the wreath from you.'" "And why should I do all this?" said Petru. "No questions, but go and do it," replied the horse. And Petru did. Scarcely had he flung away the copper wreath than the whirlwind flung himself upon it and tore it to pieces. Then Petru turned once more to the horse. "Stop!" cried the horse again. "I have other things to tell you. Take the silver wreath and knock at the windows of the goddess Venus, and when she says, 'Who's there?' answer that you have come on foot and lost your way in the heath. Then she will tell you to go to your way back again, not to stir from the spot. Instead, be sure to say to her, 'No, indeed, I shall do nothing of the sort. As from my childhood, I have heard stories of the beauty of the goddess Venus, and was not for nothing if I had shoes made of leather with soles of steel, and have travelled for 9 years and 9 months, and have won the battle of the silver wreath, which I hope you may allow me to give you, and have done and suffered everything to be where I am now. This is what you must say. What happens after?'" Okay. Petru asked no more, but went towards the house. By this time it was pitch dark, and there was only a ray of light that streamed through the windows to guide him, and at the sound of his footsteps, 2 dogs began to bark loudly. "Which of those dogs is barking? Is he tired of life?" asked the goddess Venus. "It is I, O goddess," replied Petru, rather timidly. "I have lost my way on the heath, and did not know where I am to sleep this night." "Where did you leave your horse?" asked the goddess sharply. Petru did not answer. He was not sure if he was to lie, or whether he was better tell the truth. "Go away, my son. There's no place for you here," she replied, drawing back from the window. Then Petru repeated hastily what the horse had told him to say, and no sooner had he done so than the goddess opened the window and in gentle tones asked him, "Let me see the wreath, my son." And Petru held it out to her. "Come into the house," went the goddess. "Do not fear the dogs. They always know my will." And so they did, for as the young man passed, they wagged their tails to him. "Good evening," said Petru as he entered the house, and seating himself by the fire, listened comfortably to whatever the goddess might choose to talk about, which was, for the most part, the wickedness of men, whom she was evidently very angry. But Petru agreed with her in everything, as he had been taught was only polite. But was anybody ever so old as she? I did not know why Petru devoured her with his eyes, unless it was account of wrinkles on her face. But if so, he would have had to have 7 lives, and each life 7 times the length of an ordinary one, before he could have reckoned them all up. But Venus was joyful in her heart when she saw Petru's eyes fixed upon her. "Nothing that was in the world was not a world when I was born," said she. "When I grew up and the world came into being, everyone thought I was the most beautiful girl that ever was seen, though many hated me for it. But every 100 years there came a wrinkle on my face, and now I am old." Then she went on to tell Petru that she was the daughter of an emperor, and the nearest neighbor was the Fairy of Dawn, with whom she had a violent quarrel, and with that she broke out into loud abuse of her. Petrie did not know what to do. He listened in silence for the most part, but now and then he would just say, "Yes, yes, you must have been treated badly," just for politeness sake. What more could he do? "I will give you a test to perform, for you are brave, and carry it through," continued Venus when she had talked a long time, and both of them were getting sleepy. "Close to the fairy's house is a well, and whoever drinks from it will blossom again like a rose. Bring me a flagon of it, and I will do anything to prove my gratitude." "It is not easy. No one knows that better than I do. The kingdom is guarded on every side by wild beasts and horrible dragons. But I will tell you more about that, and I also have something to give you." Then she rose and lifted the lid of an iron-bound chest, and took out of it a very tiny flute. "Do you see this?" she asked. "An old man gave it to me when I was young. Whoever listens to this flute goes to sleep, and nothing can wake him. Take it and play it as long as you remain in the kingdom of the Fairy of the Dawn, and you will be safe." At this, Peter told her that he had another task to fulfill as well as the Fairy of the Dawn, and Venus was still better pleased when she heard this tale as well. So Petru bade her good night and put the flute in its case, and laid himself down in the lowest chamber to sleep. Before the dawn he was awake again, and his first care was to give each of his horses so much corn as he could eat, and then lead them to the well to water. Then he dressed himself and made ready to start. "Stop!" cried Venus from the window. "I still have a piece of advice to give you. Leave one of your horses here, and only take 3. Ride slowly till you get to the fairy's kingdom, then dismount and go on foot. When you return, see that all your 3 horses remain on the road while you walk. But above all, beware never to look at the Fairy of Dawn in the face, for she has eyes that will bewitch you, and glances that will befool you. She is hideous, more hideous than anything you can ever imagine, with owl's eyes and fox face and cat's claws. Do you hear? Do you hear? Be sure you never look at her." Peter thanked her and managed to get off at last. Far, far away where the heavens touched the earth, where the stars kissed the flowers, a soft red light was seen, such as the sky sometimes has in the spring, only lovelier, more wonderful. That light was behind the palace of the Fairy of Dawn, and it took Peter 2 days and nights through flowery meadows to reach it, and besides, it was neither hot nor cold, bright nor dark, but something of them all, and Petru did not find a way to step too long. After some time, Petru saw something white rise up from the red of the sky, and when he drew nearer, he saw it was a castle, and so splendid that his eyes were dazzled when they looked at it. He did not know there was such a beautiful castle in the world. But no time was to be lost, so he shook himself and jumped down from his horse, and leaving him on the dewy grass, began to play on his flute as he walked along. He had hardly gone many steps when he stumbled over a huge giant who had been lulled to sleep by the music. This was one of the guards of the castle. As he lay there on his back, he seemed so big that in spite of Petru's haste, he stopped to measure him. The further Petru went on, the more strange and terrible the sights were. Lions and tigers, and dragons with 7 heads, all stretched out in the sun, fast asleep. It was needless to say that the dragons were like, for nowadays everybody knows, and dragons are not things to joke about. Peter ran through them like the wind. Was it haste or fear that threatened him? At last he came to a river, but let nobody think for a moment that his river was like other rivers. Instead of water, there flowed milk, and the bottom was of precious stones and pearls instead of sand and pebbles. And it ran neither fast nor slow, but both fast and slow together. And the river flowed around the castle, and on its banks slept lions with iron teeth and claws, and were beyond the gardens such only the fairy of the dawn can have, and on the flowers slept the fairy. All this Petru saw from the other side. But how was he to get over? To be sure, there was a bridge, but even if he had not been guarded by sleeping lions, it was painfully not meant for a man to walk on. Who could tell what it was made of? It looked like soft, woolly clouds. So he stood thinking what was to be done, for across he must go. After a while, he determined to take the risk, and strode back to the sleeping giant. "Wake up, my brave man," he cried, giving him a shake. The giant woke and stretched out his hand to pick up Petru, just as he should catch a fly. Petru played on his flute, and the giant fell back again. Petru tried this 3 times, and when he was satisfied that the giant was really in his power, he took out a handkerchief and bound the 2 fingers of the giant together, and drew a sword, and cried for the 4th time, "Wake up, brave man!" When the giant saw the trick which had been played on him, he said to Petru, "You call this a fair fight? Fight according to rules if you really are a hero." "I will by and by, but first I want to ask you a question. Will you swear that you will carry me over the river if I fight honorably with you?" And the giant swore. When his hands were freed, the giant flung himself upon Petru, hoping to crush him by his weight, but he had met his match. It was not yesterday nor the day before that Petru had fought his first battle, and he bore himself bravely. For 3 days and 3 nights the battle raged, and sometimes one had the upper hand, and sometimes the other, till at length they both lay struggled on the ground. But Petru was on top, and with the point of his sword at the giant's throat. Let me go, he shrieked. "I am on my unbeaten." "Will you take me over the river?" asked Petru. "I will," gasped the giant. "What shall I do if you break your word?" "Kill me any way you like, but let me live now." "Very well," said Petru, and he bound the giant's left hand to his right foot, tied one handkerchief around his mouth to prevent him from crying out, and another around his eyes, and led him to the river. Once they had reached the bank, he stretched one leg over to the other side, and catching at Petru in the palm of his hand, set him down on the further shore. "That's all right," said Petru. Then he played a few notes of his flute, and the giant went to sleep again. Even the fairies who had been bathing a little lower had heard the music and fell down asleep among the flowers on the bank. Petru saw them as he passed and thought, "If they're so beautiful, why should the fairy of dawn be so ugly?" But he dared not linger, and he pushed on. And now he was in the wonderful gardens, which seemed more wonderful than they had been from afar. But Petru could see no faded flowers, nor any birds, as he hastened through them to the castle. No one was there to bar his way, for they were all asleep. Even the leaves had ceased to move. He passed through the courtyard and entered the castle itself. What he beheld there need not be told, for all the world knows that the palace of the Fairy of the Dawn is no ordinary place. Gold and precious stones were as common as wood with us, and the stables where the horses of the sun were kept were more splendid than the palace of the greatest emperor in the world. Petru went up the stairs and walked quickly through 48 rooms, hung with silken stuffs, and all empty. In the 49th he found the Fairy of the Dawn herself. In the middle of this room, which was as large as a church, Petru saw the celebrated well that he had come far to seek. It was a well just like other wells, and it seemed strange that the Fairy of the Dawn should have it in her own chamber, but anyone could tell it had been there for hundreds of years. And by the well slept the Fairy of the Dawn herself. And as Petru looked at her, the magic flute dropped by his side, and he held his breath. Near the well was a table on which stood bread made with doe's milk and a flagon of wine. And it was the bread of strength and the wine of youth, and Petru longed for them. He looked once at the bread and once at the wine, and then at the Fairy of the Dawn, still sleeping on her silken cushions. As he looked, a mist came over his senses. The fairy opened her eyes slowly and looked at Petru, who lost his head still further, and just managed to remember his flute, and a few notes of it sent the fairy to sleep again. Laid his golden wreath upon her forehead, and ate a piece of the bread, and drank a cupful of the wine of youth, and this he did 3 times over. Then he filled the flask with the water from the well, and vanished swiftly. As he passed through the garden, it seemed quite different from it was before. The flowers were lovelier, and the streams were quicker, and the sunbeams shone brighter, and the fairies seemed gayer. And all this had been caused by the 3 kisses Petru had given to the Fairy of the Dawn. He passed everything safely by and was soon seated in his saddle again, and faster than the wind, faster than thought, faster than longing, faster than hatred, rode Petru. At length he dismounted, and leaving his horses at the roadside, he went on foot to the house of Venus. The goddess Venus knew that he was coming, and went to meet him, bearing with her white bread and red wine. "Welcome back, my prince," said she. "Good day, and many thanks," replied the young man, holding out the flask containing the magic water. She received it with joy, and after a short rest, Petru set forth, for he had no time to lose. He stopped a few minutes, as he had promised, with the goddess of thunder, and was taking a hasty farewell of her when she called him back. "Stay, I have a warning to give you," she said. "Beware of your life. Make friends with no man. Do not ride fast, or let the water go out of your hand. Believe no one, and flee flattering tongues. Go and take care, for the way is long and the world is bad, and you hold something very precious. But I will give you this cloth to help you. It is not much to look at, but it is enchanted, and whoever carries it will never be struck by lightning, pierced by a lance, or smitten with a sword. And the arrows will glance off his body." Petru thanked her and rode off, and taking out his treasure box, inquired how many matters were going at home. "Not well," it said. "The emperor was blind altogether now, and Flora and Costin had besought him to give the government of the kingdom into their hands. But he would not, saying that he did not mean to resign the government till he had washed his eyes from the well of the Fairy of the Dawn. Then the brothers had gone to consult old Bershka, who told them that Petru was already on his way home bearing the water. They had set out to meet him, and would try to take the magical water from him, and then claim as the reward the government of the emperor." "You are lying!" cried Petru, throwing the box on the ground, where it broke into 1,000 pieces. It was not long before he began to catch a glimpse of the native land, and as he drew near the rain, to better look at it, he was still gazing when he heard a sound in the distance of someone that was calling him by name. "You, Petru!" it said. "On, on!" cried the horse. "It will fare you ill if you stop." "No, let us stop and see who it is and what it is," answered Petru, turning the horse around and coming face to face with his 2 brothers. He had forgotten the warning given to him by the goddess of thunder, and when Costin and Florus drew near with the soft and flattering words, he jumped straight off his horse and rushed to embrace them. He had 1,000 questions to ask and 1,000 things to tell, but his brown horse stood sadly hanging his head. "Petru, my dear brother," at length said Flora, "would it not be better if we carried the water for you? Someone ought to try to take it from you on the road, and no one would suspect us." "So it would," added Costas. "Flora speaks well." But Petru shook his head and told him that the goddess of thunder had said, and about the cloth she had given him. And both brothers understood there was only one way in which they could kill him. At a stone's throw from where they stood ran a rushing stream with deep, clear pools. "Don't you feel thirsty, Costin?" asked Flora, winking at him. Yes, replied Carsten, understanding directly what was wanted. Come, Petru, let us drink now when we have the chance, so we will be well set out on your way home. It's a good thing you have us with you. We can protect you from harm. The horse neighed, and Petru knew what it meant, and he did not go with his brothers. No, he went home to his father and cured his blindness, and as for his brothers,